knowing, this is another a psychological topic, but or a topic of organizational behavior. Knowing how to deal with conflicts
Mm.
in a productive manner is a key skill that so many people miss. Negotiation is at the heart of it, so it's a productive way to deal with. And negotiation is the notion of integrative negotiation and competitive integrative and distributive. Sorry, integrative is where you cooperate, and distributive is where you compete. And there's no purely distributive or integrative situation. Really, it's a continuum between the two. There's always room for finding a way to cooperate.
Hmm.
So I believe in that. Yeah.
Yeah. And these ideas are so fundamental when you really break them down.
Hmm.
Like you're talking about how psychology really interested you. Thinking about my clinical work, like when I want to work with a youth or an individual, if I'm not working with the family as well, then
Hmm.
I'm just working with that one person and they go back into the system. And if
Hmm.
that system is flawed, then
Yeah.
there's still going to be problems. And so if I'm not focusing on the whole system in general, like the whole
Yeah.
business or the culture, then there's still going to be these problems that exist. And so it's so similar in that context. And yeah, I think like you're saying, embracing conflict, because there can be something that can come out of it if you
Hmm.
approach it correctly and if you can deal with it. Um,
Hmm.
what have you found around conflict in the workplace, and what kind of problems come up when it's not, or what have you seen how it's not dealt right?
Yeah, a good question. Thank you. So there's different ways in which conflict can be not done right. Uh, One is to be avoidant. But there's different style. There's a theory of different styles of dealing with conflict. There's you can avoid it, you can compete, you can compromise, you can collaborate. Right? Um, Avoidance. So some people are so fearful of conflict that they avoid. And when you avoid things, then things fester, and you don't pass on information that could make things better because you're not talking. But an organization is like a couple or a family, right? So if a couple never fights because they don't talk about important issues, then they grow apart. Same thing, employees who don't feel that they can express their voice or don't want to hear other perspectives, they don't grow, and they grow apart. So avoidance is one way, one negative way, and sometimes people mistake it for harmony. And when I hear people say we never fight, we agree on everything, I'm like, ooh, that sounds like avoidance. Now the more classical thing is like which I experienced, with my parents actually, and I think a lot of people experience that is a destructive kind of conflict where people fight, yell at each other, and they never listen to each other. They kind of like,
Mm.
and then they go away, and there's no resolution, and so they feel like distraught and not heard, and it destroys the relationship, right? And when you have pure competition where you're always trying to crush the other, well, you destroy the relationship eventually. Um, so I think somewhere in the middle, compromise or actually collaboration. Collaboration is really when you're curious about the other. When there's conflict, it's natural to be afraid of conflict, especially if you've had bad experiences with it. But developing capacity for conflict is when you take a hold of yourself, take a deep breath, do whatever you need to be zen, right? Any sort of meditative approach, any kind of mindfulness practice is helpful in dealing with conflict. But experience also, simply experiencing. Even if I recommend, I've worked with people who, for example, are conflict avoidant to the extent that they never say no. They're like, try to experiment, try to say no, and then track your feelings and keep a journal, see what happens. And people go to really dark places. People are afraid to say no. They're like, I used to be one of them. They go like, I will be hated. Nobody will love me. I will be unlovable if I say no. I won't have any friends. People only love me because I say yes, right? And I go, well, give it a try. Okay, so then test the assumption. Try to say no. And so it's about noticing yourself, doing small experiments in asserting yourself, and then listening to others, right? Really listening, trying to find a way to active listening, right? It's a powerful tool. So to me, like productive conflict is when you both express what is important to you in diplomatic terms and listen deeply to the other, and do something creative with that. Those two things coming together and grow the relationship, right? But I have found in my own experience, as a department chair or associate dean, I grew tremendously from being somewhat conflict averse, and or having people I'm like, I don't know how to deal with that person. That person is such an asshole, or that person is so not listening. Is so like stuck in either the domineering sort of competitive side, or. But what I try to do is, even when I'm faced with people like that, I try to find the compassionate side in me, and kind of like, and I have children now. I have two young kids, two young boys, 3 and 9, and that's a tremendous experience in also learning to be Zen, because young kids don't know when they've been having a tantrum or doing something, that's if an adult did that, you would be like livid. But with a kid, you're like, they just don't know. So you have to find the love as a parent. It's not easy, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you lose it, but find the love. Like this, they're just learning, and that's just it's a normal. Sorry, I have my dogs here. I try to always look at somebody, even somebody who's behaving really impolitely, and think that there was a child here once. And they, it's just a human being. They having, even if they're aggressive me, there's something going on there, and so that's sort of my technique, and sometimes people really push my buttons, but I really try to find the love, the compassion, go back to the love, the compassion. But not forget to be firm, and to say also at some point, this is what I need, this is what I want, this is not all right. And be direct and give them feedback, but in a loving way as much as possible. Because people don't hear feedback if it's thrown in their face in an aggressive way. What do people do? They get defensive.